The station, called Varanthos Prime, floated in the cold darkness between three dying stars. It was old. Older than most species in the galaxy could remember. Its metal walls had seen 1,000 treaties signed and broken. Its halls had echoed with the voices of conquerors and the silence of the conquered. Today, 12 species sat in the great council chamber. They called themselves the Elder Races. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and written the laws that every younger species had to follow. Hyun Taiho stood before them. He was not tall. He was not impressive to look at. He wore a simple black uniform with a small blue planet stitched over his heart. Earth, his home. He was the only human in the room. The council members looked down at him from their high seats. The Veloxi clicked their sharp mandibles together. They were insects the size of horses, with compound eyes that saw everything and cared about nothing. The Dreth pounded their scaled fists against the ancient table. They were reptiles built for war, with teeth like knives and muscles like steel cables. The Malethane sat perfectly still. They were made of living crystal, beautiful and cold and utterly without mercy. Taiho had prepared for this moment his entire life. He had studied every species in this room. He knew their histories, their wars, their weaknesses. He knew that the Veluxi had once eaten their own colonies during a famine. He knew that the Dreth had killed 3 billion people on a world called Setheri Prime simply because they could. He knew that the Malithini considered all organic life to be temporary. Noise in an eternal universe. These were not good creatures. These were not kind creatures. These were the rulers of the galaxy. They had ruled through fear and fire for longer than humanity had existed. Taiho took a slow breath. Then he spoke. "I bring a message from Earth and her colonies," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "It is a simple message. I ask only that you listen." The Dreth warlord in the second seat let out a rumbling laugh. "Speak, little mammal." "We are listening," O nodded. "Humanity asks for nothing from this council. We do not want your technology. We do not want your trade. We do not want seats at your table or ships in your fleets. We want only one thing." He paused. The chamber was silent. "Distance," Taiho said. "Do not enter the Soul Sector without clearance from Earth. Do not threaten our worlds or our people. Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. This is all we ask." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Veluxi representative made a sound like breaking glass. It was laughter. The Dreth joined in, their deep voices shaking the walls. Even the Malithane flickered with what might have been amusement. Elder Counselor Vethray of the Malithane leaned forward. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 colors. His voice was like wind through empty caves. "What happens, little human, if we do not comply with your request?" Taiho looked up at him. He did not blink. He did not look away. "Then you will learn why Earth has never been conquered." The laughter stopped for just a moment. Something passed through the chamber. It was not fear. Not yet. But it was something close to curiosity. Then the Dreth warlord slammed his fist down again. "Never been conquered? You have never been attacked? Your species is a baby crawling in the dirt while adults walk past. You have 300 ships. 300. I could destroy your entire fleet before my morning meal." The other council members made sounds of agreement. The Veluxi clicked their approval. A species from the far end of the table, something like a floating cloud of gas, pulsed with bright colors that meant mockery in its language. Taiho remained still. His face showed nothing. "I have delivered my message," he said. "Earth will remember this day. Earth will remember your response." He turned and walked toward the door. The laughter followed him like a wave. Someone threw a piece of food at his back. It hit his shoulder and fell to the floor. He did not stop. He did not turn around. Behind him, Vethrai raised one crystalline hand. "Wait, human." Taiho stopped at the door but did not turn. "Your warning will be logged in our records," Vethrai said, "as required by council law. But understand this. You are not the first young species to make threats in this chamber. The Sethri threatened us. The Corvin threatened us. The Mistwalkers of Deneb threatened us. He paused. Do you know where those species are now? Tai-Ho turned his head slightly. Just enough to speak over his shoulder? I know exactly where they are, counselor. I know what you did to them. I know how many died. I know how many children burned. His voice was still calm, still steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something hard as iron. Humanity knows. And humanity remembers. He walked out of the chamber. The door closed behind him. The council erupted into conversation. Most of it was mockery. The Dreth warlord announced that he would personally lead the fleet that would teach these humans their place. The Veluxi suggested using Earth as a breeding ground for livestock. The Malithane said nothing. But Vethrai stared at the door for a long time after the human left. In the corridor outside, Tai-Ho walked alone. His footsteps echoed on the metal floor. His face was still blank, but his hands were shaking slightly. A communication device in his pocket buzzed. He pulled it out and answered. Ambassador, said a woman's voice. How did it go? Tai-Ho allowed himself a small smile. Exactly as we expected, Admiral Yuna. They laughed. They mocked. They threatened, Good Admiral Cora Yuna replied. Her voice was cold and satisfied. Let them laugh. When the time comes, they will choke on that laughter. Tai-Ho reached the docking bay where his small shuttle waited. It was an ugly ship, built for function rather than beauty. Human ships were like that. Simple, practical, hiding everything important beneath plain surfaces. The Dreth will come first, Tai-Ho said. They are the most aggressive. I give them 6 months before they test our borders. We will be ready, Yuna said. We have been ready for 50 years. They just do not know it. Tai-Ho climbed into his shuttle and began the startup sequence. Through the viewport, he could see the great station of Varanthos Prime inside. 12 species were already forgetting his warning, already planning their next conquest, already assuming that humanity would be easy prey. They had made this mistake before. Every empire in human history had fallen because it underestimated someone smaller, someone weaker, someone who refused to give up. The shuttle lifted off and turned toward the distant light of Sol, toward home behind him. The galaxy laughed. They would not be laughing for long. 6 months passed, and the galaxy did not forget the human warning. Instead, it became a joke. On entertainment networks across 1,000 worlds, comedians performed routines about the tiny species that dared to threaten the elder races. They called it the Sol Ultimatum. They made cartoons, showing humans as small animals, shaking their fists at giants. They wrote songs mocking Earth and everyone who lived there. The jokes were everywhere. In bars where pilots drank after long voyages, in academies where young officers trained for war, in the grand halls of governments that controlled entire star systems, everyone had heard about the human ambassador who walked into the Galactic Council and told the most powerful species in existence to stay away from his little corner of space. It was the funniest thing most of them had ever heard. On military channels, analysts took a more serious approach. They ran simulations of what would happen if any major power decided to invade Earth. The results were always the same. Human ships were slow. Human weapons were primitive. Human tactics were based on ancient planetary warfare, not the elegant dance of space combat that the elder races had perfected over millennia. One famous analyst, a Veluxi general with 40 years of experience, published a report that spread across the entire galaxy. In it, he calculated that the Dreth Empire alone could conquer Earth in 72 hours. The human fleet would be destroyed in the first 6 hours. Their orbital defenses would fall in the next 12. After that, it was simply a matter of landing troops and accepting surrender. The report became required reading in military schools. It was considered the final word on humanity's actual capabilities. Nobody thought to ask why Earth had not surrendered already. Aboard the human diplomatic vessel Dauntless, Captain Park Jian sat in her command chair and watched the galaxy mock her species. The ship was officially assigned to escort Ambassador Tai-Ho on his diplomatic missions. Unofficially, It was one of the most advanced intelligence-gathering platforms humanity had ever built. Lieutenant Lee Sunwoo stood beside her, a datapad in his hands. He was young for his position, but his mind was sharp as a blade. He had spent the last 6 months collecting every broadcast, every report, every whispered joke about humanity. Another comedy show from the Veluxy networks, he said, scrolling through the data. They dressed an actor in human clothes and had him fall downstairs for 20 minutes. Apparently it was very popular. Yun did not smile. File it with the rest. Captain Sunwoo said carefully, "Some of the crew are asking why we are collecting this material. It is not pleasant to watch." Jian turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark and calm like deep water hiding sharp rocks. "We collect it because we will never forget," she said. "When this is over, when the galaxy learns what we truly are, I want a record of how they treated us. I want our children and their children to know, so they never become soft. So they never assume the universe is kind." Sunwoo nodded slowly. He understood. Humans had long memories. They wrote down their histories and studied them carefully. They learned from their mistakes and from the mistakes of others. The elder races had made a mistake. They just did not know it yet. Far away, on the edge of Dreth space, Warlord Grathos stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at a star map. He was old for a Dreth, nearly 200 years, and his scales had turned from bright green to a darker shade that spoke of experience and violence. He had conquered 11 worlds in his lifetime. He had killed millions with his own claws and billions with his fleets. Now he was bored. The Dreth Empire had stopped expanding. There were no easy targets left. Every species near their borders was either too strong to attack or already under Dreth control. The warriors were restless, the young ones especially. They needed blood. They needed conquest. They needed something to prove themselves against. Grathel looked at the small yellow star on the edge of the map. Sol, the human homeworld. His advisors had shown him the reports. 300 human ships. Primitive technology. A species that had only been traveling between stars for 2 centuries. They would be easy prey. And more importantly, they had insulted the Dreth. They had stood before the Galactic Council and implied that they could defend themselves against an empire that had burned worlds too. Ash. That insult demanded an answer. Grothel pressed a button on his command throne. "Connect me to High Command." The face of an ancient Dreth appeared on the screen. The Supreme Commander, leader of all Dreth military forces, Warlord Grathel, the old reptile said. "What do you want?" "Permission to launch a disciplinary expedition against the Sol Sector," Grathel replied. "The humans have insulted us. Their territory is rich in resources. It is time to remind the galaxy what happens to species that challenge the Dreth." The Supreme Commander was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, showing rows of teeth like yellow daggers. "Permission granted. Take what you need. Crush them quickly. I want their ambassador brought back in chains." The connection ended. Grathel stood and roared his satisfaction. Around him, his officers roared in response. 200 warships. 40 troop carriers. Enough soldiers to occupy a dozen worlds. The humans would not know what hit them. Near Neptune, in the cold darkness, at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Cora Yuna received the intelligence report. Dreth fleet movements. Supply lines being established. Troop carriers, loading soldiers. They were coming. She stood on the bridge of her command ship, the Sol's pride, and read the report twice. Then she smiled. "How many ships?" asked her executive officer, Commander Beek Gina. 200 warships. 40 transports. The Dreth are not playing games. Beek Gina's face was worried. "Admiral, we have 31 ships in the Third Fleet. Even with the orbital platforms, we cannot match those numbers." Yuna turned to look at her. The Admiral was not young anymore. Gray streaked her black hair and lines marked her face. But her eyes were bright with something that might have been anticipation. "Commander," she said softly, "how many ships do you think we actually have?" Beak Gina blinked. The official count is 287 vessels across all fleets. But against 200 Dreth warships, official count, Una repeated. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, among the ice and rock of the outer system, things were hidden. Things that no galactic census had ever recorded. Things that humanity had been building in secret for 50 years. Down general quarters, Una said. Contact all fleet commanders. Authorization code Omega-7. It is time to show them what humans are made of. The alarms began to ring throughout the ship. Officers ran to their stations. Weapons systems powered up for the first time in years. The Dreth were coming. They had no idea. What was waiting for them? The Dreth fleet crossed into the Sol sector on a cold morning by Earth's calendar. 200 warships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming with weapons that had destroyed civilizations. Behind them came the troop carriers. Filled with soldiers eager for conquest, Warlord Grathel stood on his bridge and watched the stars pass. He had already written his victory speech. He had already decided which humans would serve as slaves and which would be examples. He imagined the look on Ambassador Taiho's face when Grathel dragged him back to the Galactic Council in chains. It would be glorious. His censor officer spoke up. Warlord, we are approaching the outer boundary, the area they call the Kuiper Belt. Many small objects. Ice and rock. Grathel waved a clawed hand. Debris. Nothing more. Continue forward. The fleet pushed deeper into human space. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The ice and rock drifted around them, silent and still. Then everything changed. The first railgun slug hit the lead. The destroyer before anyone knew what was happening. It was a piece of metal the size of a small vehicle, traveling at nearly 1/3 the speed of light. It punched through the destroyer's shields like they were made of paper. It went through the hull, through the engine room, and out the other side. The ship broke apart in a silent explosion of fire and debris. Before Grathel could speak, 20 more ships died the same way. What is happening? He roared. His censor officer was screaming at his console. Weapons fire. From the asteroids. They have defense platforms hidden in the rocks. Grathel stared at the tactical display. Red icons were appearing everywhere. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Hidden among the ice and stone. Automated weapons platforms were waking up from decades of sleep. They had been placed there years ago, buried under dust and forgotten. Now they were firing with deadly precision. 23 ships were gone in 90 seconds. Raise shields. All ships, defensive formation, Grathel ordered. The fleet tried to respond, but the platforms were not finished. Missiles launched from hidden positions. Energy beams sliced through the darkness. A carrier took a hit to its ammunition, storage, and vanished in a flash of light that briefly outshone the distant sun. By the time the Dreth ships had their shields fully active. They had lost 31 vessels. Grathel ground his teeth together until they cracked. Destroy those platforms. All forward batteries, fire at will. The Dreth warships turned their massive weapons on the asteroid field. They pounded the rocks with enough firepower to shatter moons. Platform after platform was destroyed, but the platforms had done their job. They had cost the Dreth time and ships and confidence, and now the human fleet arrived. They came from every direction. Small ships, fast ships, moving in patterns that made no sense to Dreth tactical computers. They did not form lines. They did not organize into neat formations. They scattered like wolves hunting prey. Striking from angles that should have been impossible, Lieutenant Kim Junho piloted his frigate through a storm of weapons fire. His ship was small, barely bigger than a Dreth shuttle. But it was fast, and its crew was trained for exactly this kind of fight. Target their engines, he told his gunner. Ignore the weapons. Kill their mobility. The frigate dove toward a Dreth cruiser, firing as it went. The shots were precise, aimed at specific points where the hull was weakest. The cruiser's engines flickered and died. Without thrust, it began to drift. 3 other human frigates appeared and finished the job. This was not galactic warfare. This was something else. Something older. Something that came from a species that had spent its entire existence fighting against impossible odds. The Dreth fought back with fury. Their ships were powerful, their weapons devastating. They killed human vessels by the dozen. But for every human ship that died, a Dreth warship was crippled or destroyed. And then Lieutenant Junho saw his chance. A Dreth carrier was struggling to launch its fighters. Its hangar doors were open, exposing the vulnerable interior. Gunho looked at his navigation officer. She looked back at him. They both knew what had to be done. "All hands," Junho said over the intercom. "Prepare for impact. It has been an honor serving with you." The frigate turned toward the carrier. Its engines pushed to maximum. Weapons fire bounced off its dying shields. Junho watched the carrier grow larger and larger in his VIEWPOR. At the last second, he activated the reactor overload. The frigate hit the carrier's hangar bay at full speed. The reactor exploded with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The carrier broke apart from the inside, its hull splitting open like rotten fruit. The explosion caught 6 escort ships that were too close to escape. Lieutenant Kim Junho died instantly. So did his entire crew. Their names would be carved into stone on Earth's memorial wall. The battle raged for hours. The Dreth pushed toward Mars, fighting for every kilometer. Their 200 ships became 150, then 100, then 70-3. And then they saw what was waiting for them. Behind Mars, hidden by the planet's shadow, the real human fleet appeared. 150 warships decloaked simultaneously. They were not pretty ships. They were not elegant. They were ugly, brutal machines covered in weapons and armor. Some of them were so heavily modified that Dreth sensors could not identify what they were looking at. Admiral Cora Yuna's voice came through on all frequencies. "Attention, Dreth fleet. You were warned not to enter this space. You were told what would happen if you did. Now you understand that we were not bluffing." Grathel stared at his tactical display. 73 ships against 150 fresh enemies. His crew was exhausted. His ammunition was running low. Half his remaining ships were damaged. "This is your final warning," Yuna continued. "Withdraw now. Take your survivors and go. Tell your masters what you saw here today. Or stay and die. The choice is yours." Grathel wanted to fight. Every instinct in his body screamed for blood. But he was old enough to know when a battle was lost. "All ships," he said, his voice heavy with shame. "Retreat. Maximum speed. Get us out of here." The Dreth fleet turned and ran. Human ships harried them all the way to the edge of the system. More Dreth vessels fell to long-range fire and pursuit craft. By the time the survivors crossed out of human space, only 31 ships remained. Admiral Yuna watched them go. Her face was tired but satisfied. "Send a message to Earth," she said. "The line has held. Humanity stands." Round her, the crew of the Soul's Pride began to cheer. Far away, the galaxy was about to learn that everything it believed about humans was wrong. The news spread across the galaxy, like fire through dry grass. The Dreth had been defeated. Not just defeated, humiliated. 200 warships sent to crush a primitive species. 31 returned. The rest were debris floating in human space. Combat footage leaked within days. Someone had captured the automated platforms waking up. Someone else had recorded human frigates dancing through Dreth formations like ghosts. The most watched video showed Lieutenant Junho's final charge. His small ship disappearing into the carrier's hangar bay, followed by a massive explosion on 1,000 worlds. Beings watched in stunned silence. This was not how it was supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to die. They were supposed to surrender. They were supposed to be just another conquest for the elder races instead. They had fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. At the Galactic Council, emergency sessions were called. The laughter had stopped completely. Now there was only fear and confusion. Intelligence agencies that had dismissed humanity for 2 centuries suddenly realized they had almost no real information about Earth's capabilities. How had the humans hidden so many ships? How had they built defense platforms without anyone noticing? How had their primitive vessels destroyed Dreth warships that outclassed them in every measurable way? The questions had no answers, and that frightened the elder races more than anything else. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the mountains of what was once called Korea, the United Human Coalition held its own council of war. Around the table sat the most powerful humans alive. Admirals, generals, scientists, diplomats. They had won the first battle, but they all knew the war was just beginning. Dr. Choi Min-ji stood at the head of the table. She was small, with gray hair pulled back in a tight knot, and glasses that reflected the light from the display screens. Her specialty was xenopolitics. She had spent 40 years studying how alien species thought, how they made decisions, how they could be defeated. The victory at Seoul was necessary, she said, her voice calm and precise. But it was not enough. The Dreth will come again. So will others. Every species that sees us as prey will test our borders. We must make an example that resonates for generations. Fleet Admiral Oh Doyan leaned forward. He was a large man with the build of someone who had started his career as a common soldier. Now he commanded every ship in human space. What do you suggest, Doctor? We do not have the resources to attack the Dreth homeworld. That would require a fleet 3 times what we currently possess. Min-ji touched a control, and a star map appeared above the table. She zoomed in on a system deep in Dreth territory. Kethferal, she said, the birthplace of the Dreth conquest fleet. For 800 years, they have built their warships in orbit around this world. It is sacred to them. Every Dreth warlord makes a pilgrimage there before their first command. Every ship that has burned an alien world was constructed in those shipyards. Admiral Yunus studied the map. Their defenses must be massive.
They are, Min-ji agreed.
300 warships patrol the system at all times. Orbital fortresses. Ground-based weapons. It would be suicide to attack them directly. Then what are you proposing? Doyen asked. Min-ji smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The Dreth expect a direct attack. They expect formations and fleet battles and all the things that galactic warfare is supposed to be. They do not expect us. She touched another control. A new image appeared. A small, sleek ship, unlike anything the standard human fleet used. Stealth cruisers, Min-ji said. We have 12 of them. They were built in secret 10 years ago and have never been used in combat. They carry experimental jump drives that can bypass normal space entirely. They can appear anywhere without warning. The room was silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. Send 12 ships into the most heavily defended system in Dreth space, Admiral Yunus said slowly. We destroy their sacred shipyards, and we get out before they can respond. Correct, Min-ji said. We do not need to defeat their fleet. We only need to hurt them so badly that they will never forget. We need to show the entire galaxy that nowhere is safe from humanity, that we can reach them wherever they hide. The vote was unanimous. The operation was approved. Captain Park Ji-yeon was chosen to lead the strike group. She had proven herself at the Battle of Seoul, coordinating intelligence operations that had given human forces critical advantages. Now she would take the war to the enemy. The 12 stealth cruisers gathered at a hidden base in the asteroid belt. Their crews were volunteers, every one of them. They knew the risks. Many of them would not come back. But they also knew what was at stake. Gyeon addressed them before departure. Her voice was steady, but her words carried the weight of everything humanity had endured. For centuries, the galaxy has treated us as insects. They laughed at our warning. They sent fleets to enslave our children. They thought we would be easy prey. She paused. Tonight, we show them how wrong they were. Tonight, we write our name in fire across the stars. For Earth, for everyone we have lost. For everyone who will come after us. Ships jumped. They emerged in the Kethferal system without warning. One moment, empty space. The next, 12 human vessels hanging in the darkness above the ancient. Shipyards did not even have time to sound alarms. Gyeon gave the order. All ships open fire. The stealth cruisers carried weapons designed specifically for this mission. focused energy beams that could cut through orbital structures, missiles that sought out power generators and ammunition stores, kinetic rounds that punched through armor like needles through cloth. The shipyards began to die. Explosions rippled across the orbital facilities. Ships still under construction broke apart. Fuel depots ignited in chains of fire that spread from station to station. 800 years of Dreth military history burned in minutes on the surface below. Millions of Dreth watched their sacred place destroyed. Some screamed in rage. Some wept. Some simply stood in silence, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The defensive fleet scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The human ships were already moving, already jumping to new positions, already firing again. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos. For hours after it began, the operation was complete. The shipyards of Kethferil were molten slag. 37 Dreth warships had been destroyed trying to stop the attack. Ging opened a broadcast channel. Her voice reached every station, every ship, every world in the system. This is Captain Park Jian of the United Human Coalition. Earth remembers every insult. We forgive nothing. Tell your masters that the next warning will be the last. Leave us alone, or we will return. And next time, we will not stop at shipyards. The stealth cruisers jumped away. They had lost 2 ships in the attack. 47 brave humans who would never see home again. Their names joined Lieutenant Junho's on the memorial wall. But they had done what they came to do. The galaxy had received its message. Fear spread faster than any fleet could travel. Species that had mocked humanity now locked their borders and doubled their patrols. The Dreth Empire fell into chaos as warlords blamed each other for the humiliation. The elder races began to whisper a new word. They spoke of humans. Dangerous. The word was correct. 1 year had passed since the battle at Sol. 1 year since the shipyards of Kethforil burned. 1 year since the galaxy learned to fear a species it had once dismissed as insects. Now, Heian Taiho walked back into the council chamber at Varanthos Prime. The same metal walls. The same ancient seats. The same 12 elder races sitting above him. But everything else had changed. This time, no one laughed. This time, the chamber was silent as a tomb. The Veluxi did not click their mandibles. The Dreth did not pound the table. Even the Malethans seemed diminished somehow, their crystalline bodies darker than before, and this time. Taiho did not stand at the petitioner's platform. A new seat had been constructed during the year. It was made of simple steel and dark wood, materials from Earth. It sat at the same level as the other 12 seats. The 13th seat. A place that had never existed before in 10,000 years of galactic history. Taiho walked to the seat and sat down. He did not ask permission. He did not wait for approval. He simply took his place among the rulers of the galaxy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Elder Counselor Vethray broke the silence. His voice was careful, measured, nothing like the contempt he had shown 1 year ago. Ambassador Taiho, you have requested this session. You have the floor. Right? Taiho nodded. He looked around the chamber at the species that had mocked his people, threatened his world, sent fleets to enslave his children. He felt no hatred, only a cold, clear understanding of what had to be done. Humanity does not seek empire, he began. We have no interest in conquering your worlds or enslaving your people. We do not want your ships, or your technology, or your submission. We want only what we have always wanted. To be left alone? Paused, letting the words settle into the ancient air. But we understand now that being left alone is not something the galaxy gives freely. It must be earned. It must be defended. It must be paid for in blood and fire and sacrifice. The Dreth representative shifted in his seat. He was new. The old one had been executed after the disaster at Kethforil. His scales were young and bright green, and his eyes were full of barely hidden rage. But he did not speak. He did not dare, Taiho continued. For 2 centuries, we watched you. We studied your wars, your cruelties, your contempt for species you considered weak. We saw what you did to the Setheri, to the Korvan, to the Mistwalkers of Deneb, We learned from your mistakes, and we learned from your victims. He stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye followed him. You asked me once what humanity truly is. I will tell you now. We are survivors. Every catastrophe that should have killed us, we endured. Ice ages, plagues, wars that burned our cities to ash. We climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. We looked at the void and refused to blink. His voice grew harder. Your ancestors thought extinction was easy. They thought burning worlds was simple. They were wrong. Life does not want to die, and humanity least of all. Vethrai leaned forward. What do you want, Ambassador? What are your terms? Taiho returned to his seat. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. The Sol Sector is sovereign human territory. Any ship that enters without clearance will be destroyed. Any hostile action against human citizens anywhere in the galaxy will be answered tenfold. These are not requests. These are not negotiations. These are facts. He looked at each member of the council in turn. We offer trade to those who want it. Cooperation to those who respect us. Peace to those who leave us in peace. But we will never again trust our survival to the mercy of others. We will be watching. We will be ready. And we will remember everything. The council voted unanimously to accept humanity's terms. There was no debate. There was nothing to debate. The evidence of human capability was written in the wreckage of Dreth warships and the ashes of Kethral. Treaties were signed. Trade agreements followed. Borders were established and guaranteed. For the first time in galactic history, younger species had forced its way to the table through pure, its undeniable strength. When the session ended, Taiho walked out of the chamber. This time, no food was thrown. No laughter followed. The representatives watched him go with something new in their eyes. Respect. And beneath it, fear. Later that night, aboard the Dauntless, Admiral Cora Yuna shared a drink with Captain Park Jian and Lieutenant Commander Lee Sunwoo. The ship was traveling slowly through neutral space, escorting the ambassador back to Earth. Through the viewport, stars wheeled past in endless patterns. Among them, human colony ships were already heading toward new horizons. Worlds that had been too dangerous to settle before were now within reach. Humanity was expanding, carefully but steadily, into a galaxy that had finally learned to take them seriously. Sunwoo stared at the stars. Do you think they will try again? The Dreth. Or the others. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Her face was tired. The last year had cost her greatly. Friends dead. Ships lost. Decisions that would haunt her dreams forever. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. Maybe. Probably. The galaxy is full of species that only understand power. Some of them will test us again. Some of them will think we were lucky, or that our defenses have weakened, or that they have found some secret advantage. She took a slow sip of her drink. But now they know the cost. Every warlord who dreams of conquest will remember what happened to the Dreth. Every empire that considers us prey will think about burning shipyards and desperate. Pilots flying their ships into enemy hangars. They will ask themselves if the price is worth paying. Gion nodded. And most of them will decide it is not. Most of them, Yuna agreed. And the ones who decide otherwise will learn the same lesson. She smiled, and there was something fierce in it. We have been preparing for this for 200 years. We are not finished yet. Sunwoo raised his glass. To Earth. To humanity, Gion replied. Yuna lifted her glass to meet theirs. To the warning they should have heeded. They drank together as the ship carried them home. Behind them, the galaxy continued its endless turning. Species rose and fell. Empires grew and crumbled. Wars began and ended without resolution, but something had changed. A new power had taken its place among the stars. Not an empire of conquest, but something more dangerous. A species that wanted only peace and was willing to destroy anyone who threatened it. On 1,000 worlds, children who had once laughed at human jokes now learned a different lesson. Humans were not prey. Humans were not weak. Humans were the species that had looked at the mightiest powers in the galaxy and said no, and made it stick. The galaxy would never forget, neither would humanity. They had earned their place among the stars. Not through diplomacy or submission, but through blood and fire and the refusal to ever give up. They had proven that even the smallest species could become something terrifying if pushed. Far enough, the warning had been delivered. The galaxy had finally listened.